We are starting the last session of the conference. We are running a bit late, so we really need to fasten the proceedings now. We are late by at least 45 minutes or so. The last session is on opportunities of governance in 2019 mandate, wherein when it is considered as a very decisive mandate. So what are the challenges and what are the opportunities for the government? What are people's expectations? What are the tasks before the government? And what is agenda of the ruling party? All of these things definitely matter when we discuss the election results. To discuss these things, we have amongst us a very eminent panel. We have Mr. Sudarshan R, who is Deputy Director of India Foundation. He is from Tamil Nadu, but presently working at the All India level for India Foundation and is engaged with several activities with India Foundation. Our next panelist is Dr. Joe Thomas, who is a professor of sustainability, and he is working with MIT World Peace University presently. Dr. Joe Thomas has his specialization on sustainability issues and is working closely with United Nations agencies for last several years. Our third panelist is Dr. Stanley Johnny, who is International Affairs editor of The Hindu. He is based in Chennai. Dr. Stanley has completed his doctorate from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and he also has recently published a book on Islamic State, ISIS at the doorstep of India, which has been acclaimed by many. Our fourth panelist is Aditya Ingre, who is a student of MIT School of Government, and he is quite active in terms of the election campaigning project, other projects, etc. He worked with the former MP Raju Shetty during last Lok Sabha election in his election campaign team. And we are very fortunate to have Professor Dr. Vijay Khare as chairperson of this session. Dr. Vijay Khare is professor in the Department of Defense and Strategic Studies and director of Yashwantrao Chauhan National Center of International Security and Defense Analysis at Savitribai Phule Pune University. He is also dean of several departments in Savitribai Phule Pune University. Dr. Khare provides excellent leadership to all international engagements, and today what is being acclaimed as Pune as a city of international students in India, Dr. Khare has contributed a lot in it in last more than 1 decade or so, that there are thousands of foreign students who are coming to Pune University each year, and Dr. Khare is the one who is cooperating and collaborating on all such initiatives. Dr. Vijay Khare was also awarded Young Social Scientist Award for Rare Source Material Collection for research work on role of British Army for social mobilization and its impact on Indian society. He has several publications and research projects to his names. Some of his research projects are third-party mediation in India-Pakistan conflict, challenges to the Indian society and culture in the age of globalization, and most importantly, he has published a set of books on Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, and one of it is a critical study of thoughts of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar on issues related to India's national security, an aspect which was generally being neglected in terms of Dr. Ambedkar and his contribution. So he has published a book on Dr. Ambedkar's contribution on national security, on India's national security also. Now I hand it over to Vijay Khare sir to begin the proceedings of the session.
Thank you, Parimal, for kind introduction. At the outset, let me congratulate MIT and specifically Parimal and his team for organizing such an important event in the Pune city. After election, this is first kind of seminar which is scheduled in MIT, and I've gone through all proceedings and the kind of issues from last 2 days we are discussing. It is really mind-blowing for everyone, because mandate 2019 is real concern for each and everyone. So in this session, already all my colleagues panelists introduced by Parimal. I will not take that much time. We have time limit. Each one will take 8 minutes. 8 minutes will be fine, and 8 minutes each one will talk. Then there will be a few minutes for question answer, and then concluding remarks. So without much taking time, I will invite who will start. Aditya, English? Yeah, Sudarshan, please. Sudarshan.
Thank you, Vanakkam. Don't worry, I'm not going to speak in Tamil. Relax. Today's most powerful thoughts are conveyed in 18 minutes. When Parimal told me about this conference, he said 10 to 12 minutes. Now it's down to 8 minutes. So TED, you have TED Talks where 18 minutes, world's most powerful thoughts are conveyed, where videos go viral. Today we have to finish in 8 minutes. I just want to touch on one aspect. Before that, I'm tempted to answer one question on Dravidianism which came up. I'm just going to answer that and then go. See, in 1962, Annadurai, as a member of parliament in Rajya Sabha, after the China war, made a very revelatory statement. He said, when it comes to the question of aggression against the state, we side with the state. After that statement, the DMK gave up on the so-called secessionish attitude, and then slowly it's withered away. Interestingly, as Professor Suhash Palshekar also said, before the last assembly elections, they made this stunning statement where 95% of their party members are Hindus. That's a huge makeshift for DMK, and it's restricted to Tamil Nadu, not other southern states. Anyway, on politics, I want all of us to keep few things in mind. One is what we can learn from looking at the present Prime Minister is, one, politics is not charity. You are in it to perform or you perish. As we speak, the next membership drive of the ruling party has been launched. When this particular ruling party came to power in 2014, they launched a similar membership drive. From there on in, they became the world's largest political party, beating the Communist Party of China. For BJP to do that just 1 year after coming into forming the government is a tremendous achievement. The campaign did not start in 2014 or 2013. The campaign started in 2012. It was the first speech of the present Prime Minister after winning that election. He was in Ahmedabad and he spoke not in Gujarati but in Hindi. That was the first signs for political enthusiasts, observers to say, oh, he has national ambitions. Campaign began there. From there on in, up to the results which came out on May 23rd, 2019, he has worked 24/7. Whether you like him, dislike him, that's another debate. That's another discussion for all of us to have. But if you want to do well in politics, you have to have it as a full-time job, not a pastime hobby. Okay, number one. Second, I look at this election as a continuum election. So when you have to quantify the so-called Achhe Din, what he professed, you have to quantify that at the end of 2024. That's why you see the so-called massive mandate, what he has called. Some speakers made pronouncements on majoritarianism. See, look, this government also brought in a resolution on yoga, which was just yesterday. The Yoga Day was celebrated as a result. 193 countries affirmed that resolutions in the United Nations. You know, the number of countries which were Muslim majority affirmed this resolution in the United Nations. They did not look at it as a Hindu resolution that is coming up. I was just coming from Madurai. Near Madurai, there is Tumbaipatti. It's a village of late leader Kakkan. who was a former Home Minister of Tamil Nadu. In the village, you must have all heard of this sport called Jallikattu. Okay? And the first puja for that sport happens in a temple. And the first man to inaugurate that puja or perform the puja is a Muslim man. There are no issues in the village whatsoever. While at the societal level, on communities, we have to work, but at the village level, this concept of so-called majoritarianism, etc., is not existent. Second, as soon as the present ruling party took over, also one of their main objectives was to strengthen the Coromandel coast, which they have done very significantly. But what we must also remember is governments in Northeast are generally, they tilt towards whichever party is in power in the center. On the economic front, at the macro level, the government has done very well, keeping inflation in check. If not, it would have been news. It has reined in fiscal deficit, and it has also increased public investments and infrastructure. But on the micro level, there is still a long way to go. For example, I was reading one of the main reforms of this term of the government will be on chosen areas of privatization. They cannot do it in full swing. They'll have to look at Air India as a case study and how they can do it. Similarly, public sector banks. When this government came to power, obviously they inherited a bad loan scenario. Now, Mr. Modi is supposed to be in favor of public sector units and public sector banks. It's a huge challenge in front of him as to how he will actually handle this crisis situation in front of public sector banks. The insolvency code. So this correlates to the IBC, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code bill that was brought. There are still challenges. So this is one such challenge in front of the government. Everyone has been, one of the things with Mr. Modi is he will take political risk in the first half of his governance. If you see the previous government, in the first half, you saw the government going all out vis-a-vis land acquisition. In 2016 end, we stopped hearing about it. 17, we don't know. So, careful labor reforms and land reforms could be key areas of focus going forward for the government. Because when we go and tell the world, come make in India, if our manufacturing is not at 20% of our GDP, then it's going to get tough. So if we have to enable the concept of make in India, these reforms will be key going forward. One area which is being discussed widely now is, of course, the concept of one nation, one election. At the India Foundation, we have been researching on this and we have been having seminars on this concept. I do not see it happening even in this at the end of this 5 years, because it needs a lot of discussions and with not just various stakeholders, but constitutionally how it is going to be enabled or put into effect. But that is one subject that will be looked at in these 5 years. How, because you have a lot of parties, barring the Congress, even the left is favoring one nation, one election in its effect. So we'll have to see how he takes this forward vis-a-vis his tenure this time. On foreign policy, the approach has been out of the box. What we have gradually moved from is non-alignment to strategic autonomy. With every country, we have a dedicated, separate relationship. What you can strongly look forward to is India attaining the permanent membership to the UNSC when India celebrates 75 years of its independence. I think that's a goal which the government will definitely work towards. Counter-terrorism strikes on Balakot happened. I want you all to understand the upside of Balakot is huge because we have changed the contours of counter-terrorism in South Asia to go inside POJK, Pakistan, and hit only terror targets and come back and not harm civilians is a huge achievement. So in a way, we have given a message, we are not far from Lahore. But the downside to this is, if there is an attack tomorrow, the country will expect a bigger response than Balakot. So how the government is going to regard that would be something our strategic analysts and those in power will be constantly deliberating. So the next time a terror attack happens, the onus is on the government to improve from Balakot, if not no. There are some aspects I like to clarify that, look, having observed Mr. Modi in Gujarat and he's come here, he started his story from Gujarat. There is a clear experience of being almost a 5-time chief minister and then taking over as prime minister. There is no test of patriotism for anyone every day. As a researcher, analyst working with a think tank, let me make it clear, we work with the government. So there is no test of patriotism every day. My freedom starts where his nose stops where his nose starts. It's as simple as that. So that's one. Second, I tend to disagree on there is corrosion of governance by enabling talent at the joint secretary level, because that's a move not just of this government, but it was initiated during Vajpayee's era. But if you take the example of Tamil Nadu, for one Anganwadi worker's post, please guess the amount which is charged as corruption. Please guess. One Anganwadi worker's post. Anyone take a shot? No. 10 lakhs. 10 lakhs for an Anganwadi worker's post is charged. So, and I also want to assure that knowing Mr. Modi, he relies on bureaucrats to do his work. He will not let go. If you see the PMO today, it is strengthened with top joint secretaries who are handling every minister. In fact, please don't put this on record and on video. The ministers are subsumed. The joint secretaries are strengthened. So the bureaucracy is actually strengthened. And this move of bringing private talent is something we all have been vouching for a long time. We need private talent to enter as joint secretary level, because some complex matters cannot be solved by AC room bureaucrats. That is for sure. So with that, 10 positions after such a long hiatus have been opened up. Am I running out of time? Yeah. And finally, one thing you must be aware that he has not even paid attention to his core promises, the so-called Hindutva core promises that have been announced. And knowing him, seeing demonetization, so on and so forth, demonetization even in his own ministers were not unaware. So we don't know when these moves will actually take place, or whether at all it will take place or not. That is why if you see Ram Temple or UCC or anything is mentioned in 20th page of the manifesto, 32nd page of the manifesto. So it does not occupy the core of his thinking at this present point in time. And he's trying to create that image of himself as to not being dependent on that alone. Thank you so much.
I titled my presentation as The Meaning of a Mandate, an analysis of Modi manifesto from an SDG framework. When we look at a manifesto, when we look at a political mandate, and that too a very significant mandate, there are different ways to analyze it. For yesterday we saw that, today we saw, mostly from a political, sociological, psychosocial, there are different framework is used to understand the election victory. But I just want to focus only on the manifesto. The manifesto, I call it as Modi manifesto, not even BJP manifesto. So that's the first thing, let me make it very clear. And my presentation is about a brief introduction about the entire issue of manifesto and how to analyze the manifesto. And I specifically look at BJP manifesto, what are the content of the manifesto. Then I'll present briefly on SDG, Sustainable Development Goal, targets and indicators. And I try to compare between the SDG mandate and the BJP manifesto and certain concluding remarks. So this is the structure of my presentation. When we talk about opportunities of governance in 2019 mandate, and whether the BJP government, the Modi government, whether they'll stick to their manifesto, we don't know. But I think probably for an analysis point of view, we should begin with, okay, we should give the benefit of doubt that at least there will be the direction of the programs will derive from the manifesto. Or manifesto could be used as a tool to understand which direction things may go. If you look at the previous government, the manifesto was generally a framework, general indication, not necessarily following one by one. And also, what are the ways in which we monitor the performance of the government? And my assumption is that look at the manifesto again, and also looking at manifesto from various framework, and probably looking at Sustainable Development Goal is one of the beneficial tool to understand it. I'll come to that why it's important. And the BJP manifesto is about, there are 15 core areas and 75 programs. Why 75? 2022 India is going to be the 100th year of our independence anniversary. So that is why.
2022 75th.
Sorry, 75th anniversary. So they put 75.
47
So they put 75 target programs as the key programs of manifesto. Within that, it is arranged in 15 areas. One is about the nation first, agriculture and farmer welfare, doubling the farmers' income. India as the world's third largest economy, infrastructure foundation for a new India, healthy India, determined India, good governance, education for all, women empowerment, inclusive development, cultural heritage, and foreign policy. These are the areas in which the 75 programs are arranged. And some programs get emphasis, some get lesser emphasis. So what I'll do is I'll go through some of it, I'll highlight it, and also I'll pick up the SDGs, I'll explain it, and some of the SDGs I try to compare it, because comparing these two, it will take probably I need about an hour or so. So when you talk about nation first, these are the programs suggested. Zero tolerance approach towards terrorism, national security, welfare of the soldiers, combating infiltration, coastal safety, implementing citizenship amendment bill, combating left-wing extremism, Jammu and Kashmir Article 370. Next one, please. So this is the first one, the nation first. These are the programs we proposed. Second, I just looked at only the health part of it, because I thought I look at health as an important aspect of the Modi's manifesto, and also the second part of the previous regime, previous government, health was prominently brought up into the national discourse. Health was not in the national discourse as the first part of the government. And also I just want to know that how far health is coming up in the national development, because in my view, the important infrastructure of any country is a healthy population. So when we talk about infrastructure, we need to revise our definition of infrastructure. Unless we start understanding health as a major infrastructure of a society, we may not be able to take it more forward. Next one, please. Sorry, I just wanted to highlight this one. Health for all, making healthcare accessible, strengthening health infrastructure, immunization and nutrition, elimination of tuberculosis. Only one disease specific comment was made in the entire manifesto. Next one, please. And education for all, only two: primary and secondary education, skill development. That's very interesting part of it. Primary and secondary education, no tertiary education, no technical education, no adult education, none of them are mentioned. These are the two ones. I'll come to again that one. Then inclusive development is another a major aspect of this manifesto. There are several programs are listed: ensuring justice for all, strengthening Sabka Vikas, ensuring welfare for poor, responsive to the needs of aspirational middle class, commitment to geographical equity, development with dignity for the minorities, caring for the elderly, enabling Divyangas, political resolution on the matter of Gurkha land in fact, ensuring the welfare of the labor force, pension scheme for all the small shopkeepers, ensuring welfare of artisans, protecting our children, empowering transgender population. Next one, please. Now let me briefly introduce a sustainable development goal. We are talking about 17 goals. These are no poverty, zero hunger, good health, quality education, gender equality, good governance, affordable clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industrial innovation and infrastructure, equality, sustainable agriculture. Sorry, the 12th one I can see that. Okay, the 30. Responsible consumption, responsible consumption. 13th about climate action. 14 life below water. 15 is about life on land. 16 is about peace and institution building. 17 is about partnership. And now why it's important, next one please. I'm not getting into the details, so next slide please. So before that. So when you look at, there are 17 goals, 169 targets, 230 indicators. So this is the magnitude. Now when we look at SDGs, this is a global covenant, a global agreement signed by 192 countries. And Prime Minister Modi himself was in 2015 at the General Assembly, and I had the privilege to listen to him at the General Assembly, and I spoke in response to this. So I was monitoring this for quite a long time. So India initially made huge commitment towards SDG, and many of us worked behind the scene. At some point in time, we thought Prime Minister Modi will be making SDG 3 as the national priority, and we'll take a global leadership in SDG. So that is a discussion. India may take a leadership on one of the SDG and create an SDG fund for the global development. That was the plan, but somehow the last minute didn't come through. Maybe that's impact of how the international understanding and perception of the Indian government, India's positioning in the international realm changed slightly, a little bit. So probably they have scaled down the international perception building to slightly downgraded. Probably that's one reason. Next slide, please. The number one is about no poverty. If you look at the manifesto, I did a word search. The poverty reduction welfare programs are mentioned, not necessarily poverty reduction per se is mentioned. Welfare program to reduce poverty, but never they mention poverty will be completely eradicated, or complete poverty eradication program will be one of the manifesto. Next one, please. And also I just wanted to highlight few of the targets on that. By 2030, eradicate extreme poverty for all people everywhere, currently measured as people living with less than $1.25 per day. There is no promise in the manifesto that poverty will be completely eradicated by 2030. So that way, don't expect a dramatic poverty reduction program from the, if you go by the manifesto, we can't expect a dramatic poverty reduction program in the coming years. This has got very significant implication in the political understanding. We are talking about poverty, 30 to 40% of the people below $1.25 as a criteria. But absolute poverty, there is a lot of discussion take place. But poverty reduction, significant level of poverty reduction may not be, we may not be expect, we don't have to expect from the current government. And the next one is, sorry, yeah. And the zero hunger. The next slide, please. By 2030, end hunger and ensure access to, by all people, in particular, the poor and people in vulnerable sections, including infant, to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food for year round. When we look at the nutritional status of the country, again, about 40% of the children are undernourished. So we are not seeing any clear program towards that direction. There are, within the 75 program, there are children, our children as a priority is mentioned, but details are missing from there. But how the details may come up, it maybe depends on the political organization, political pressure, and also from the other international communities' political pressure. But we don't know whether that pressure will work on these areas, because this also, the hunger reduction is not necessarily clearly manifested again. Next one, please. Next slide, please. Good health and well-being. I just wanted to focus slightly more than on this area. Next one, next slide, please. By 2030, reduce the global maternal mortality ratio to less than 70 per 100,000 live births. This is one of the significant challenges for India: maternal mortality reduction, infant mortality reduction, and neonatal mortality reduction. And my assumption is that unless you name it, unless you specifically propose it, neonatal mortality reduction and infant mortality reduction may not come to the 70. In some states it is 7, at the same time some states is 360. Within the states there are variation is so huge. So unless there is a specific program which is named infant mortality reduction, neonatal mortality reduction, and also child mortality reduction, probably these targets may not be achieved in the near future. Next one, please. And the strengthening the prevention and treatment of substance abuse, including narcotic drug abuse and harmful use of alcohol. This is an important goal agreed by international community, that we should look at the issue of substance abuse, including alcohol abuse. In states where the alcohol is freely available, there is no alcohol abuse support programs. We have alcohol is freely available. At the same time, alcohol-related abuse, alcohol-related death is phenomenally going up. At the same time, the programs are not in place. I have to reduce my presentation. I'm just running through. Next one, please. Next one. Next, please. Quality education, I just want to mention. Ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education, but the manifesto says only 2. Education for all, and just very basic reference about education. But if you want to achieve the quality education for all, it requires extreme level of reform, extreme level of access to education program, and also a targeted program for inclusive education program. Next one, please. Next, please. Next. Next. The clear water and sanitation. There's a lot of discussion about sanitation, but the water and sanitation is mostly focusing only on one river, but not necessarily a comprehensive clean drinking water program. So the challenge is that maybe we have to clean up Ganga water, but there is an issue of clean drinking water, particularly in the context of drought. The drought across the country, drinking water will be one of the major source of conflict. So we don't have a clear program to address the drinking water, as well as to monitor water-related conflict between the state and within the state and within the communities. Next one, please. Affordable and clean energy. There is no clear mention about promoting renewable energy. So probably an energy policy may be one of the major drawbacks of the entire manifesto. We can expect that it may come through, but I would consider as one of the major drawbacks of the policy. Next one, please. Decent work and economic growth. And this year, in fact, yesterday, International Labour Organization's 100th year, a decent work agreement is sanctioned. But that calls for a decent, extreme labour reform. And probably this is the one we can expect. But there is no indication that there is a massive labour reform may come through from the manifesto. Next one, please. Next. Industry and innovation and infrastructure. Making in India, but if there is a footnote on Make in India and promoting innovation, probably that would have been a much more strong manifesto. Next one, please. Responsive consumption and production. And probably, if you look at the underlying principles of this manifesto, it goes against this. Uncontrolled production, uncontrolled consumption is one. Climate action, in fact, there is a huge silence in the area of climate action. In fact, all our mining sector is immediately opened up. That's one of the specific program is mentioned. Mining will be open for private sector supposed to be with a reduced monitoring mechanism and regulatory mechanism. Next one, please. Life below water. Actually, there is no program for cleaning our sea water and reducing pollution on the marine coastal pollution. So that, again, I would say that this will remain as one of the glaring drawback of the manifesto. Next one, 15. Life on land. There are some discussions here and there in the area of inclusive development. There are some mention about it. Next one. Goal number 16 about peace, justice, and strong institutions. There is a mention about legal reform, but at the same time, there is no discussion about alternative forms of problem solving, alternative forms of reducing violence, and also monitoring the issue of violence. Next one, please. See, 17 is about partnership. Here comes the issue of foreign policy. But the foreign policy, number one, we are moving away from India had a non-partisan foreign policy leadership in the global level, and also India is aspiring for a permanent seat at the Security Council, but I have serious doubt about it, because if you want to become serious as a member of Security Council, you should begin acting like a Security Council member. Do you have a position on any of the global issues? Are you willing to put money on issues internationally? And also India got an extensively strong overseas development assistance program, but that is not flagged anywhere in what we are going to do with. Are we going to increase our overseas development assistance? India is a major donor international development assistance in particularly African countries and Asian countries. But that how we are going to leverage for the issue of India's position in international level, that need to be looked at carefully. And also India was a leader of the developing countries. In that capacity, I would say India is a member of probably 30, 40 international committees. If you look at the performance of that committees, I would suggest that maybe India should take a close look at India's performance in various international commissions and international committees. Internationally, India is not yet behaving like a member of a Security Council member. So unless you start behaving, unless you start believing in it, unless you start putting money into it, unless you start speaking about it, it's very likely that India could be a member of Security Council. And I just want to conclude that India is already giving up some of the institutions we built up extensively, particularly the issue of SARC, South Asian Regional Cooperation, that is actually removed from the manifesto. At the alternative, they are supporting and building a BIMSTIC, Bay of Bengal coalition that is based in Bangladesh. At the cost of SARC, there's only one reason to corner Pakistan. Politically, whether it's good or not, but we have institutions which we should use for leveraging our position internationally. So it is for building it, strategically utilizing it, not sidelining it. So conclusively, the manifesto gives a very good indication about what we can expect, and some of the things, and also one of the major drawbacks is that what is the financial allocation for this one? Unless there is money allocated, there is no point in. See, for example, health, we are investing about 1.2% of the national budget. The international essence is that it has to go up to 14% to see some significant impact. And thank you for this opportunity. I had to cut down this dramatically. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Sticking to the time limit is the biggest challenge, it seems. So I'll give a brief outline of what I was supposed to say. And I'm sure that you had wonderful time here discussing India's politics, parties, governance system, etc., etc. I would like to speak of the topic which is close to my heart, foreign policy. That's what we all, some of us were trained in, and I'm also happy to be here because I could see some of my old friends. We were university mates in Delhi. Parimal is there, Lenin is here. So coming down to the topic, foreign policy, a nation's foreign policy, as we know, is determined by several factors. Generally speaking, foreign policy, you have to influence the countries, maximize the country's interest overseas. You have to build new partnership. You need to look for resources, defense partnerships. All these factors are moved in the country's national interest. But geopolitically speaking, because geography in geopolitics, geography is your destiny. You can't choose your geography. So you have to formulate policies based on the geographical reality. So geopolitically speaking, there are broadly three factors in formulating the foreign policy narrative. One is your neighborhood. 2 is your extended neighborhood. 3 is how your ties are with the big powers. So these three factors, India's foreign policy, as we know, has evolved over the years. It's not the same as it is in 1950s. But over the years, I think these three factors in the evolution, at every phase of this evolution these three factors have played a major role in India's foreign policy. So when we look at Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government, you could locate these three foreign policies in his major foreign policy decisions as well. Because let's see the first 5 years of the Modi government. If you look at these three factors in the reverse order. Big powers means I am referring to the United States, Russia, and China. Because United States and China are the world's biggest and second largest economies, and the US is the mightiest conventional army. Russia is a military superpower. So the reference is to these three countries. So the point is that, Indian government, Mr. Modi's government, broadly speaking, so when it comes to its ties with the big powers, it tried to balance India's interests between these three powers. Because while at the same time there is a clear tilt towards the United States, which you can see that. But that tilt is there while at the same time maintaining this balance and ties with the other two countries. When it comes to China, India has a China problem. Because there are a few issues are there. There is a historical mistrust is there. There is a war which both of us fought, India and China fought. And then there is a border issue which is still unresolved. And then thirdly, which is a more contemporary issue to India, is China's rising influence in India's backyard, especially in the Indian Ocean region in South Asia. So the border issue, this China problem led to the Doklam standoff during the first 5 years of the Modi government. But at the same time, we could see that the Doklam standoff didn't escalate into an open conflict, into a direct conflict between these two countries. There is less appetite for a conflict between India and China on both sides, I think. The joke among the journalists is that even Arnab Goswami was silent during the Doklam standoff, because the restraint was visible on Indian side, on the Indian media side. But then the Prime Minister went to Wuhan for the informal summit with President Xi Jinping, and both sides actually dialed down tensions. And since then, you could see that there was a clear restraint in relationship between India and China, despite these thorny issues such as the boundary dispute, China's foray into Indian Ocean region, etc., etc. And when it comes to the United States, I would say that the Modi government has gone to the next level in deepening India's partnership with the United States, compared even to Manmohan Singh government, which had reached the Indo-nuclear deal. Because even the Manmohan Singh government was wary of deepening India's defense cooperation with the government. But the Lemova agreement, which is a crucial logistics agreement, which was signed between the Narendra Modi government and the United States and the US government. So under the Lemova agreement, there is a refueling and replenishment agreement. It is basically that certain designated facilities, Indian facilities, would be open for American ships as well as aircraft. And the American facilities, in theory, would be open for us as well, but Indian ships are never going to the Pacific. So in reality, not in the immediate future. So in reality, this is an agreement that suits US interests. So we signed the Lemova agreement. India has also stepped up arms purchase from the United States, which is a major demand from the Americans as well. We did this while maintaining very deep ties, its defense ties, intact with Russia. So this is the balancing act which we saw in the big powers segment. When it comes to the extended neighborhood means I am referring to West Asia, East Asia, and Central Asia mainly. Among this, West Asia is critically important for us. Why? Because India is an energy-dependent, oil-dependent, energy-dependent country. We have to source energy from the West Asian region. Mainly we are sourcing it from West Asian region. And hundreds of thousands of, if not millions, Indians are working in the Gulf, in the West Asian region, secondly. And third, West Asia, Iran, another West Asian country, is India's gateway to Central Asia, practically speaking, if you look at the geography. So West Asia is also, and Israel, of course. India has very strong defense ties as well as technology cooperation ties with Israel as well. So there are these three poles in West Asia. One, the Saudi-led Sunni bloc. Two, Israel, of course. And then third, Iran, which is a Shia country. So again, in this relationship, deepening India's partnership with the UAE and Saudi Arabia, that bloc was one of the priorities of this government. But you could see a tilt again towards Israel, which in my view, in terms of strategic benefit, I would say that Iran and the Saudi bloc are more important for us, because in a sense, Israel is important in terms of defense equipment and technology, but at the same time, energy resources as well as the geographical opening to West Asia, to Central Asia, appears to be more prominent. But the tilt in India's foreign policy is towards the Israelis, but still, the equilibrium between these two sides is not broken. There is a balance, you could see it balance as well in the foreign policy makeup. And when it comes to the neighborhood, which is where my views are more critical, when it comes to the neighborhood, I think the government was trying to assert its influence through a muscular foreign policy, which I think is not working. So I'll tell you why it's not working is that what is India's primary interest is, in my view, should be on peaceful rise of India. Basically, because war is, we can have romanticized versions of war, but war is catastrophic. And especially if you look at the post-war history, the United States never go to war with Canada. France and Britain do not fight a war. And even China and Russia, which had Cold War hostility, they have also warmed up towards each other. They had serious problems during the Cold War. So the point is that your immediate neighborhood, it is in your fundamental interest that your immediate neighborhood stays peaceful. And it doesn't mean that you cannot use military force at all. Military force is, it can be used as a deterrence mechanism. But in the case of India, I think the two major military interventions of this government, one is the surgical strike and then the post-Pulwama air strike. So the question which I would like to ask as a student of international relations is that, did the surgical strike enhance India's deterrence? If it had enhanced India's deterrence, there wouldn't have been a Pulwama strike. Basically, if you look at it through the theory of international relations, the surgical strike did not enhance India's deterrence. Not just that, there was Pulwama and the counter-attack. India was forced to resort to counter-attack because we had set a standard after surgical strike and after going to town with it. So the post-Pulwama counter-attack had taken India to the brink of an open conflict. There was a dogfight between India and Pakistan, taken India to the brink of an open conflict, and an open conflict with a neighbor, which is a military power, would have been, I took 10 minutes, just give me 2 more minutes, I will conclude it, would have been dangerous. So this is the overall foreign policy makeup of the government. And the new government, I think if you look at these 3 segments, for the new government, the challenges are more. Why? Because in the United States, there is a more unpredictable, erratic government, which has a list of demands, host of demands towards India. The Americans, especially the Bush administration, doesn't want India to buy oil from Iran. They don't want India to buy weapons from Russia. They want India to balance the trade deficit with the United States. They also want India to play a bigger role in Asia Pacific in containing China. They also want India to play a bigger role in Afghanistan in stabilizing the Afghan government. So there is a host of demands from the Americans. So if you listen to them, if you agree to them, you will upset the other players. If you don't agree to them, the Americans would be upset. So the point is to balance between these two, and the balancing act gets tougher for the next 5 years for the government. And the same problem you will find in the extended neighborhood as well, because there are tensions between Iran and the United States. So Iran is also an important partner for India, and if there are conflicts, it would hit India's energy supply as well as India's access to the Central Asia, because India is building a port in Iran, Chabahar port, which gives us access to Afghanistan bypassing Pakistan, which is also in India's interest. And in the immediate neighborhood, again, as I said, Prime Minister Modi's, the 2 countries which he visited after assuming office were Maldives and Sri Lanka, which shows that the neighborhood is close to his foreign policy agenda. But the point is that the neighborhood first policy, I think, should be actually peaceful neighborhood first policy. Only then it will empower India's interest, and also it will help India's natural rise as a regional power. Otherwise, a permanent hostility in the neighborhood, irrespective of other influences, other forays you are making, a permanent hostility in your neighborhood will basically impinge on your natural rise. Thank you very much.
Myself Aditya Ingre, and I am currently pursuing my MA in Political Leadership and Governance. This is my second year now. With just little bit of knowledge, I'll go through how security's dimensions have changed today. There are basically two schools of thought. One is related to the state specific, like only terrorism or threats related to internal and external threats. And another one is like poverty or environmental issues or economic issues which are taken into the consideration. Now, like looking at security, we have military forces, paramilitary forces, and bureaucracy in terms of IPS or anything else. So when we look at investment in all three phases, it's pathetic. Like from 2014 to 2019, there are still like investment is increasing, but the amount of like it was nearly crossed 1 lakh crore rupees. Out of it, 82% was used for mainly for police reforms, but still those are surplus amount has been left with the ministry which has not been used properly. Like CAG has observed that weaponry in several states as outdated as there is shortage of arms and ammunition. But like when we have money, surplus money which are not spent, why can't we use for such a challenges when states are running out of it? And also one case after 14 Finance Commission, it was made clear that police reforms, modernization of police reforms will be dealing from central pool of like center was given 100% money to modernization. It will be now in the 75 to 25% of state has also to contribute in it. And also now vacancies, like current government is with the minimum government and maximum governance. It has to go out of it and give. Still there are vacancies in all paramilitary forces as well as and when paramilitary forces and military forces also. When we look at it, it was like which account it had 8% of vacancies last year. And also my panelist said that lateral entries should be encouraged at some point of time. But even with little knowledge, we can say that system will not accommodate lateral entries and will not make him work properly in the system. And also this is the chart, like vacancies over the period of time have increased. They have not been filled by central government. We have issue of dedicated coordinating agencies. We have NIA, Internal Intelligence Bureau, NSG, but there is a lack of one coordinating agency, which is the major challenge in front of this government. Taking the case of 2611 of Mumbai, people felt that there was lack of coherence between all stakeholders involved in it. But the issue was like Home Ministry was not able to make correct prompt action to calling NSG for its implementation. Now, over the 2 years, I have observed that terms of reference given to the various committees are at point of conflict. For also, like we have Kargil Review Committee. Its mandate was to review the events leading up to Pakistan aggression in Kargil district and thereby recommend such measures as considered necessary to safeguard national security against such armed rebellion in the future. But the course of action taken by Kargil committee was so less because due to terms of reference. See, when here we need to mention two cases. Terms of reference. Upside. Like when we have Yom Kippur War in Israeli cabinet set up an inquiry commission. It was asked not only to ascertain intelligence before the war, but also its assessment and also decision of duly authorized military and civilian bodies. The question is, we are making committees, but for 2611 also, we have not blamed one agency or one particular persons or set of persons for it. We are only blaming, but sustainable action should be taken against those culprits so that such a things will not happen in the future. And also in Falkland Island Review Committee also, they said that dealt with the way in which responsibilities of government were discharged in the period of leading up to Argentine invasion in Falkland Islands. So here, when like Pulwama and everything was happening in the parliament, there was no discussion or there was no criticism of current government due to like their political pressure, while people or media will treat them as an anti-national. So this can't be done. Here, when we look at Winston Churchill faced a censored motion in the House of Commons even during the war, is an example for it. Now there are lots of non-traditional issues. I'll not go through each and every one. But like my first panelist said, in sustainable, in agenda of current government, there is a, second panelist said, there is a political resolution for Gorkhaland. So if we see why Gorkhaland has emerged and what is the situation now, there are 6th schedule which is present in the constitution has not been that strong, or whenever it is providing results in northeast regions, it can't be given to the other states as like that, because, come down. Separate statehood is a major challenge in front of this government. Just upside. Please. Here we can see these are aspiring states aspiring areas who are willing to have a separate state. Now with the current government, we are hoping that at least Vidarbha section will be carved out and will have its own set of government institutions. And in Northeast also, we have insurgencies and other issues. See, insurgencies, for it, Mizoram was the best example how insurgencies can be tackled. And now I'll just go through the defense budget, last year's defense budget. It was, we have a second largest military in terms of personnel, 1.2 million, and first is only China, which is 2.1 million. There are shortage of funds for modernized and indigenous equipment. Defense budget crossed 3 lakh crore this time, but highest in any year previous years. Still, procurement over indigenous production has not been happened. Like 66% of allocation for year-round expenditure were for salaries and everything else. And also, like when committee has been set up, there should be a proper implementation of it, and there should be a proper discussion and debate in the parliament, and it should be adopted so that it could have a better results and outcome. And like in defense also, we had Ajay Vikram committee also. Now there are reports that still not all recommendations of Ajay Vikram committee has not been accepted. And looking at bureaucracy, still second ARC report has been in the news. All the recommendations by second ARC has not been accepted. So there is a huge challenge in front of government. Thank you.
Let me thank all 4 speakers who has been just covered from national security to good governance. One has talked about good governance, foreign policy, Millennium Development Goal, and government vision, and then last speaker is national security. This is a very difficult task to summarize the conceptual understanding and deliver the message to the audience, what you would like to say, but within a short span of time, all 4 speakers tried to give justice while delivering their address. Let me summarize what are the opportunities of governance in the mandate 2019. When we talked about mandate or government, presently world shifted from geopolitics to geoeconomics. And while there is a paradigm shift in national security, there is an understanding of the national. Sir, please. Welcome, sir. Just last session covered by 4 speakers, and the topic varies from national security to Millennium Development Goal to the foreign policy. And all speakers, they have talked very conceptually, and they define or they have discussed the issue in a very different way. Just let me summarize how we define national security and how we define the nationalism. That is a difficult task to common man. While talking about the national security, look at from the birth of nation state to the present scenario, how we define the national security. Take example of US, any threat to US trade, they are treating as a threat to US national security. Take example of Pakistan, any threat to their religion, they are treating that threat to national security. So in Indian case, how we define national security, that is a main concern. Any threat from China or Pakistan, can be talked it is a threat to national security. Then second concern about how we define a nationalism. So these are the two important issues for the new young generation. We need to understand it because our academic scholarship will teach them that how to define nation building, how to define to understand national security and nationalism. So I will not take too much time because already Honorable Narendra Jadhav sir and Jagdish sir is there. So I'm giving and handing over to mic to the organizers, and on behalf of all four speakers and on behalf of the organizer, I thanks for all speakers on behalf of the organizers. Thank you.